everyone got through. But the Gemara outlines basically six different reasons why we celebrate Tubav. And it's obviously very appropriate that we're learning this Gemara tonight, as tonight is Tubav. And we're gonna see at the end, like we're gonna talk about it a little bit, but there's two, in terms of halacha, there's two different Indians that people do on Tubav. One is to learn late into the night, and the other is to have meat. So we're going to talk about why that is as we get to the Gemara. But for Hashem, it looks like we're being Mekayim both of them as we're learning into the night, and we had good meat. Okay, so I'm gonna just read the end of the Mishnah, right? Which the Gemara mentions, right? The two dots. Amar ben Shimon ben Gamliel, Ohio Yom Tovim Yisrael Kefam Misha Aser Be'av Ufa Yom Kippur. So I'm gonna just read the Mishnah, and then we're gonna go straight to the Gemara. So the Mishnah says, Amar ben Shimon ben Gamliel is on Kapav on the base. If you want to follow, Ohio Yom Tovim Yisrael Kefam Misha Aser Be'av Ufa Yom Kippurim Shebahem Ben Yisrael Yotos B'Fli Lavam Sheulin Shelo Levayish Esmi Shein Lo. Right there. So the day of Tubav, right, the 15th of Av. So there's no Yom Tovim like Tubav and Yom Kippur, because on that day the Bnos Yisrael, they would go out, right? They'd be dressed in white. They'd be borrowed. They'd make sure to borrow their clothes to not embarrass people who didn't have. Right, and the Mishnah continues, Kol Kalim Tuin Tefillah, right? They would all their clothes, they would make sure to immerse them as to not embarrass the people who didn't immerse them. With no Yerushalayim Yotos, the Chos Bekromim, right? The no Yerushalayim, they go out and they dance. Mayu Omros, they'd say Bafar San Nefa or Eimat Al Berlachaf, Tini Nefa, Benoit, Tini Nefa, Bemishpacha. Right? They'd say, okay, young men, you don't just look at beauty, look at family, and then say Sheker, Fein to have a Yopi Isha, you're at Shemiti Sal, the Omar Tunulam, Priya Devi, I live a Shard Matseva, Fade Omer. Senator Ebnos Sion Bemelch Shlomo Be'etra Shadarlo Imo Biom Chatu So Biom Sim Chasibo Biom Chatu So Matan Torve Yom Sim Chasibo is a Binyan base of Mikta Shibana Mir. Okay, so the Mishnah from the South is talking about these psukim, right, which talking about the wedding, right, the wedding day between, it's like this parable between us and Kadosh. Okay, so let's go into the Gemara. The Gemara is going to do 6 reasons, right? We're gonna go through them. And this way we'll walk away with, why people say why at least we don't see Tafshin tomorrow. We'll know why, right? Six reasons why it's the Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Yom Kippurim. Right, we understand why Yom Kippur is the Yom Tif, right? Because we mentioned Yom Kippur and Tubav. That's why we even mentioned Yom Kippur here. Mishum de East Space the Mafila. Yom Shenis Nibo Luchos after right? We know why Yom Kippur is a Yom Tif, right? It's a day that we're forgiven for all our sins. It's not a question. Ela Tubav Mahi, right? And the Luchos were given. The second Luchos were given that day. Ela Tubav Mahi. Why are we selling Tubav, right? That's the question we're asking. So answer number 1. I'm Rabbi Amar Shmuel Yom Shehutru Shvatim Lavo Zebazet. Right? It's the day that the Shvatim were permitted to marry each other. So what's going on here, right? What's going on? So if you remember, right, from the psukim in Bamidbar, the Bnei Slavchad, they come to Moshe and they say it's not fair, right? We don't have any brothers, right? We're not going to get any land. So what does Moshe do? He asks Hashem. He says, "What's the din here? What should happen?" And he says that these women, they should really get land. Okay, so great, everyone's happy. But what happens later is that Bnei Slavchad, they were part of Shevet Yosef. They were part of it, and so the Bnei Yosef. They come and they say, right? They say it's not fair. It's not fair to us, right? Because these women, they're going to get land, right? And then they're going to go marry someone else from a different tribe. Okay, maybe it's going to be, let's just say Shimon, right? So what's going to happen? Yosef has this designated land, and now these women, right? They're going to marry someone from Shimon, and then this land is going to become Shimon's land, right? Because their children, they belong to Shevet Shimon, so it's not fair. So what happens is there's a decree, right, that people are not allowed to marry. You're not allowed to marry outside their shevet. That if you're a Yosef, you have to marry Yosef, right? Yehuda to Yehuda, whatever it is, right? And so that was a decree. So on Tubav, that was a day that they permitted that they permitted again people to marry whoever they wanted, right? So why is it such a great day? It's a great day because people people want to marry who they can marry, and there's a lot more options. So that's always a good day. Okay, and so the Gemara says, "My Darish." How do we know this? So the Gemara says that had the bar short from Bash that makes no snow hot. So you say that we learn from Zeh, right, of this from the pasuk that this is something which would only be practiced in this generation, right? That for the next generation it wouldn't hold true, right? I guess once they got to Eretz Yisrael, this thing was revoked and they were able to marry who they wanted, but that day that happened was on Tuesday. Okay, next one. That's it. That's number one, right? Number two. Amar Rav Yosef Amar Rav Nachman. Yom Shehuter Shevet Binyamin Lavo Bikal. So it was a day that Shevet Binyamin was able to come into the rest of Bnei Israel. Why? Shneimar. How do we know this? Ish Yisrael Nishba b'mitzvah le'mor ish menu lo yitim libo lo yitim bito le'Binyamin le'isha. So Pasuk says that the people of Israel, they made a promise and they said, our children they can't marry into Binyamin. My Darish, right? So how do we know this, right? How do we know that it I'll explain what that means. Let me just finish this. Right? My Darish Amara Mimenu. So it says Mimenu, right? That from us, but not for our children. That means once our children came, this Zera would be overturned. Okay, so what's going on here? What are we talking about? So if anyone remembers Shoftim, what happened is there's a horrible story about Pelegish Begiva, and basically it's a very sad story, and there's this woman, and she basically goes into the city, and the people of Binyamin can help her, right? She needs somewhere to stay, and no one helps her, and she ends up dying because of this, right? And so what happens is it almost starts like a civil war between Binyamin and the rest of Bnei Israel. And so they get very upset at Binyamin, and they make these promises, and they say, we're not going to marry into Binyamin. And so that's what goes on. But eventually they forgive Binyamin a little bit. They realize it's too hard. Binyamin's gonna go extinct. So eventually they overturn this. And what day did they overturn this? This was Tuba. Okay, so far we see that's reason number one. That's reason number two. So we already see like a little theme here about like marriage, right? People are able to marry. It's sort of like this unity that's going on. That's answers. So those are the first two answers. So let's keep going. Answer number three. Amar Rabba Bar Chanam or Yochanan. What's the third answer? Yom Shekulo Bo Matei Midbar. Amar Mar Ad Shelo Kulo Matei Midbar Lo Hayat Dibor Im Moshe. Shenet Mar Vehika Shetamu Konshe and Kamala Mus. Vayidaber Hashem Eli Hayat. So what does Rabba Bar Chanan or Yochanan? What does he say? He says it's a day, right? It's a day that the people that the generation of the desert, they stopped dying. And because of that, Moshe was again able to speak with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Because Mar says that until the day that everyone died, right, the generation of the Midbar died, Moshe wasn't able to speak with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he sources that in the Pasuk, right? But once everyone died, then he was able to speak with him. So if you guys got a chance to see this Rashi, Shekulo and the Bar brings from the Medrash, who says, this very interesting idea that once the decree of the Meraglim happens, right? Once the decree of the Meraglim happened that this generation, they're not going to go into the desert. I mean, they're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, right? What happens? Every single year on Tisha B'Av, the entire generation, they would dig themselves a grave, right? Can you imagine? Every single year on Tisha B'Av, they would dig themselves a grave. They don't know if this is going to be the year they die or not, right? They go to sleep that night thinking, okay, maybe this could be the year that we're no longer alive. And so then came the morning, announcement comes and says, okay, if you're alive, you can get out of the grave. If you're dead, yes, you're dead. You're not getting alive. You're not coming out of the grave. And so this would happen every single year on Tisha B'Av, right? Until they got, and because people, they knew they weren't going to make it to Eretz Yisrael, right? So they didn't know when they were going to die. Maybe it's year 5, maybe it's year 35. So finally, on year 40, right, they all do this, and they see that everyone gets up in the morning. So they think, okay, maybe we made a mistake, maybe we counted wrong. So they do it again the next night, right? They all dig their graves, go to sleep, wake up, everyone's still alive. They do this every single year until they get to the year 40. And then finally, until we get to the 15th day of Beav, they get to Beav, and once they see the moon of Beav, they realize, okay, we counted correctly, so they turn that day into a Yontif. But what's interesting is that the Gemara seems to be saying, right, that this Yontif isn't because people stop dying. That's not really what it's saying. It's saying that the Yontif is because once everyone stopped dying, then Moshe was then able to speak with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the way that, so Rashi explains, it means like really all the time Moshe was able to speak with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, but not in the same fashion, right? Peh, which was something which is about Moshe, which was unique. But he said that he wasn't able to do that the whole time after from staying around until everyone died. But I was learning with Benji and Max, and I was telling them that this seems to be the reason, right? So, but they were telling me that it could be there was two reasons, right? It could be there's two reasons there's a Yontif. It's not necessarily only because Moshe was able to do the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's because also it's very clear if you look at the Rashi, it's also they turn that day into Yontif, right? Because everyone stopped dying. So that's the third answer, maybe even the fourth answer. Depends if you want to hold with me, if you want to hold like Benjamin Max. Okay, so let's do answer number 4. Ula Amar Yom Shagitel Hoshea ben Ela Kruznios Shehoshe Birava ben Nabat Al Hadrafik Shalo Yalu Yisrael Raga. So this was the day that Hoshea ben Ela, who was the king, he removed these guards that Yerovam ben Nabat put on these paths so that Bnei Israel wasn't able to go up and to go to the Beis Hamikdash during the Shalosh Regalim. So if you guys, again, requires extensive Navi knowledge, that Yerovam ben Nevat, who was the wicked king, one of the wicked kings, that he actually separated Yehuda and Israel. So he made these guards to basically not allow people to go to Yehuda on the Shalosh Regalim. He set up his own Mizbeach and Bamos so that people would go there and Shalosh Regalim, and so people weren't able to go. And so then this king, right, who Rashi actually tells us, he says it wasn't like this guy was a good king. This guy was also a Rasha, that's what Rashi said, but he didn't really care so much. Or he said people should have their own free will, they should be able to do what they want. And so he actually removed those guards. And so what's interesting is though that the Maharsha says that this actually came to hurt Bnei Israel because what happened? People had the option to go, right? After he removed them, people had the option now to go up to the Beis Hamikdash and Shalosh Regalim, and what happened? People didn't go, right? And because of this, Bnei Israel was punished. So how come this is now a Yontif, right? If at the end of the day, it's just something which harmed Bnei Israel more than hurt them. So Maharsha says it's because at the end of the day, this is something which had the potential to be something amazing, right? We're able to go up to Beis Hamikdash again. So that's why it's a Yontif. Also, it really connects to this theme, right? About obstacles that we're talking about, like Bnei Israel coming together. Okay, so let's see answer number 5. Ramas Namar Yom Shenatnu Haruki Beisar Lekura. And so Ramas says this is the day that the people who died in Beisar, in Beitar, right, that they were able to be buried. So the people who died in Beitar, they weren't able to be buried. I think there's we'll get to in a second, right? They were able to be buried for a long time. And so on Tu B'Av, they were finally able to be buried. Ramas says, Oto Yom Shenitnu Varubi Beitar Lekura Yamna Tova Meitiv, right? They on that day they were mitaking to add a bracha into benching, the fourth bracha, Tova Meitiv, right? Hato Shalom History, right? That the toe is that their bodies didn't decompose, and the Meitiv is that they were able to bury these bodies. And so I think Tosfos asked, says, okay, well, how come they established this in benching? It says because it's a horrible medrash. He says it's very tragic, but the Rishonim tell us that the king, he would pile up these bodies. He pile up these bodies as sort of like a fence around his vineyard. So he wanted to establish a bracha of something to do with wine, which is a lot of people have a minhag to say benching with a cup of wine. So that's why they added into benching. Okay, so that's answer number 5. And the 6th answer, Rabbi Rav Yosef Damar Tavai Yom Shapasku Melachos Eitzim Lamar Rafa. So they say that this is the day that they finished cutting the trees for the Mizbeach. That they need to cut all these trees to basically be used. And this was the day they finished cutting these trees. And so the Gemara continues. Tanya Rabbi Lezer, Agado Omer Michamisha Asar Beav Ilach Tashash Kofa Shachama. Right, and then on the 15th day and on 15th day of Av and onwards, the sun kind of diminishes, its strength diminishes. Below how you course in 18 Lamaracha Lafisha Inan Yavation. Right, and then from then on, they wouldn't cut any more trees for them to be used for the Mizbeach because the trees weren't dry. And if the trees weren't dry, Rashi explains there's going to be worms to be used. There's going to be worms in the wood, and that you can't use that for the Mizbeach. So let's just get to the two dots, right? And then we'll talk about this one. Amar Menashe, the Karle Yom Tavar Migal, right? They call this day the day of the breaking of the axe because they stopped using the axe, they stopped cutting. Mikan ve'elach, right? So then the Gemara says Mikan ve'elach from here and onward, meaning from the 15th and onward to Ba'al, which is again tonight. The Mosif Yosef is the low Mosif Yeyasi. So what does this mean? So if you look at Rashi, he says the low Yosef means so Mikan Be'elach, the Rashi Mikan Be'elach, Michamisha Asar Ba'av Be'elach, from the 15th of Av and onwards, the Mosif Leilos Ala Yamin. That basically this is the time of the year, right? Time of the calendar where the night starts to get longer. That if you start getting right, if you turn to Torah more, right, you're more into your Torah, you're gonna add life onto your life. The low Yosef, right? If you aren't Osik the Torah in the nights, right, then you're gonna be gathered up. And Tanya Yosef, my Yosef was Mina Mar Yosef Tikre, the Kolomar means to say you most below you. You're gonna die before the proper time. So that's Tuba, right? That's on the 15th day. It's a time to increase in Torah. So let's talk about the wood for a second, right? That how come this was a day where it was made into a yantif, right? They stopped cutting the wood. Why is that so great? So the Ritva says that they're celebrating completing a mitzvah. Right? That they were able to finally complete a mitzvah. And this was the day they finished. And he said that this is actually one of the sources that we have for having siyams nowadays, right? Who says that, right? Who says that we should make a big party when we finish something? So this is one of the sources that when you finish something, you should make it siyam, and it should be very late, right? You should have a big party, right? And so the Rav actually said that about this is that we see, right, that since this is a source for siyam, right? You see, what's the point, right? They're like making this siyam, they're making this party. Why? Because they finished doing the preparation so that they could now do the mitzvah. So the same thing is true when we make our own siyams, right? We're not making a siyam because now we're done. Right? We're making a siyam because now we finished learning so that we can use it, right, and go back and actually understand it, right? Because once you make the siyam, you've seen everything now, right? So then when you go back, learn from the beginning, now you're actually able to understand it. That's why we say Hadran Alach, right? So that we should return to you. What's interesting though is that Rabbeinu Gershom says that it was actually a yantif, right? Because at that point, right, they were able to stop cutting wood and they were able to go get back into the learning, and that's why it was a big yantif. But anyways, we see from here, right, that this is like really where the sources come from about the halachas that we mentioned about tuba, right? To learn more about meat, right? The learning more is like what we mentioned, right? That the 15th of Av is when the nights start getting longer, and there really is this idea that from tuba and onward, you should focus more of your learning in the nighttime, right? That you should extend your learning in the nighttime because of this idea about tuba. And the other idea is eating meat, and so I think that. Right, we see it's a real halacha, like the Magid Avram has a comment about it, the Ma'ariel has a comment about it. It's not really a halacha, but there's like people mention it. It's not made up, but it's like I think it relates to this idea about like the Siyam, right? That they finished completing their work, and so they want to like, they want to make a party, and they say Ein Simcha Basar, right? That there's no joy unless you have meat. So this is, I think I could be that this is where the idea to eat meat on Tubav comes from, stems from this idea.
Yeah.